Okay, so in this video, I'm going to be proving how time always existed. So I was in a game when someone mentioned a comment of how some people think that time didn't exist before the Big Bang, and then naturally when I hear that, I think automatically time always existed. So then I thought, okay, well then all this would be a good time to prove how time always existed and why time always existed. So I'm basically just gonna draw a nice little representation of the Big Bang. So the most confusing thing about time is basically what it is, and then when I looked into the situation, I realized on how people are misunderstanding what time actually is and what is making it so confusing. And basically, what I realized is time isn't really. Basically, when people think of the word time, they think of it like, oh, it's a compass, like a device. When in actuality, it's more of a direction. It's more of a response. It's more of a comet. Okay. The reason I realize this is because I realized, well, what is time? And I was sitting here thinking, well, I guess the best way to put it of like what time is. So first of all, time isn't necessarily even a thing. It's because when you look at how it's defined, you realize, oh my gosh, time isn't even a thing. All it is a more of a direction. It's something we rely on, and we rely on it so much that we think it's something, but it's not even really anything. So the truth of like, well, what is time is time is what we expect to be going on in the past or the future or the present. So the only thing time actually is what we expect to be going on in the past or the future. So the only way the only thing we need to do to prove that time always existed, the only thing we have to look for is there anything going on? Cuz that's what time is. When we when we when we're trying to understand, well, what times are what, we're just trying to understand, well, what is going to be going on, or what was going on in that past time, or what is going on in that future time. So I argue that time itself is infinite, that there are infinite amounts of things always going on, and the only reason it's confusing is because people are leaving out dynamics and circumstances and not realizing its importance. So the whole revelation is, okay, so when we get to the Big Bang, as far as that we know of, nothing always existed before then. That we know of from what when we're looking at it, when we that's what we see. That's not too surprising because it makes sense. Well, why does it make sense? Well, because that's the way it has to be, because it's the way it is. That's why it makes sense to me. So anyway, when we reach that point of the Big Bang, we come to the understanding that nothing always existed. Because when you reach that point, there's nothing else there unless we discover something else outside of that. As far as we know of, nothing. So nothing is something and nothing is everything. Because 99% of basically everything is empty nothing, space. So now we can prove, well, as long as space always existed, then time always existed. Because the only thing that would allow for time to always exist is if we expect for something to always be going on in the past or expect for something to always be going on in the future. So as far as that we know of, we always expect for space to always be going on in the past. So as far as when we look in the past, space has always been going on. And then as far as when we look in the future, we expect for space to always be going on in the future. Therefore, if space is always going on, has always been going on, and we expect it to always be going on, then we can conclude that time has to always exist and always will exist, because the only thing we need for time itself to exist forever and always to have existed is if anything was always going on. It doesn't matter what it is. If there's anything always going on. And then so what we have discovered that we know of is that nothing has always been going on. So nothing itself is something, anything. Nothing is space. So space itself has always been going on. So you cannot reach a point. So we're saying 100 quadrillion, bazillion, 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 bazillion years ago, space was still going on and was still always there and was still infinite amounts of space. So there's not a wall, there's not a border. It's like basically an infinite amount of paper. So that's what makes life and existence so miraculous, is we needed infinite amounts of space. We needed infinite amounts of paper. Guess what? If we did not have infinite amounts of paper to put everything, to draw everything, nothing could exist. Where would we put anything if there wasn't infinite amounts of space? As far as that we know of, space is infinite. And I argue that there's no way to prove that space is not infinite, because there's no way that it could not be, because it has to be infinite. But I mean, the thing about nature is we could maybe discover that maybe space is not infinite, but as far as I know of, that is yet to be discovered, and it cannot be proven as far as that we know of. And now it makes sense if you just connect the dots. Oh, well, that's why no one is finding an end of space or a limited amount of paper, is because there's infinite amounts of paper. So all time is if we expect for something to be going on. It's not even actually really anything. It's really just a circumstance. Time is just a circumstance. It's not like it's a device. It's not like it's like how the moon exists and it's actually there and it's its own creation. It's not like time is created, because it was always there. It's just a circumstance. Same with space. It's not like space was created. It's just a circumstance. It was just always there. Nobody had to create time. Nobody had to create space because it was always there. If something's always there, it doesn't need to be created. That's what makes it so confusing is people are thinking, "Oh, it was created or it just automatically popped into existence." But the thing is, space didn't ever just pop into existence as far as that we know of, and time itself did not just pop into existence as far as that we know of. And that's one of the main things we could attribute to what would make time limited to have a beginning. Well, of course, we could still come to other circumstances, but that would be one of the more obvious and more straightforward things to look forward to. So if we could look out there and say, "Oh, well, space it wasn't always infinite," then we can conclude that time itself may not have always been infinite because space is what we rely on and attribute to always going on because space was always going on. So all we need is anything for to always be going on in order to it be attributed to time itself. So anything itself has to be going on forever, and time itself is always going on. So if anything is going on, time is going on. If nothing is going on, well, then time itself isn't going on, but nothing has always been going on. So there has never been a point that there is nothing not going on because it's going on. Space is going on. It's not going on because if it was not going on, then that would mean that there would not be space itself. The only way that there would not be space itself is if that we knew nothing, if nobody knew, if nobody existed. How could anybody know anything if nobody exists? So the whole argument of did time always exist? Well, that depends if anything was always going on. So now it depends if you believe that space has always been going on, because some people would try to argue, "Oh, space, you're going to reach a point where space was not going on." But my argument is that space has always been going on as far as that we know of. So hopefully that solves some answers here for everybody. So yes, time is, my opinion, time has always been going on, and time will always be going on, as far as that we know of. And I do take a firm stand. Well, if we can conclude that space itself are to ever reach a point in the future where it is not going on. So, like, basically, if it turns into a brick wall, then that would still be something else going on. That would still be something else, and time would still exist because something else is still going on. But my argument is it's just not possible. But if it were, then we can reach that point where time did not. Because there's nothing, but we always have something going on. Because space is always going on.